Our next guest is going to be Megan O'Shea, speaking for herself, Rick Van Keulen and Amanda Dodd. Rick Van Keulen, Amanda and Megan have been working with the Cairnlea Conservation Reserve's Committee of Management for more than a decade to restore 3 remnant native grasslands in the Melbourne suburb of Cairnlea, the most well-known being Iramoo Wildflower Grassland Reserve, get it right. Rick is a dedicated land manager with a wealth of local knowledge, outstanding observation skills, can respond to all sorts of things, is inventive and a good problem solver, which, you know, we all know how important that is. Megan is speaking on behalf of the team and has a background in ecological research, working on striped legless lizards and spiny rice flower. She currently leads the GREEN Lab at Iramoo, which is a nexus, we're a nexus here, I reckon, a nexus between land managers, community groups and Victoria University, all working for great grasslands. Amanda has been involved with the Iramoo grasslands for over 20 years and is a founding member and current secretary of the Cairnlea Conservation Reserve's Committee of Management. Please welcome Megan O'Shea.
Wow, great. Thank you, Adrian, for the invitation, and thanks, Steve, for such a great opening presentation. It's, yeah, amazing. Rick and Amanda are really, it's disappointing they're not here today, so they send their apologies. The work of the Cairnlea Conservation Reserve's Committee of Management is done on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. We pay our deep respects to elders past, present and emerging, and the Indigenous people that we work with at Iramoo over time, and also to the Indigenous people that are in the room with us today. I can't decide whether I should have glasses on or glasses off. It's very challenging. Cairnlea Conservation The Cairnlea Conservation Reserves are a set of 3 remnant native grasslands in the suburb of Cairnlea, which is approximately 17 kilometres northwest of Melbourne. They're highlighted in red and at the top left of the screen. The reserves were part of what was previously known as the Albion Explosives Factory site, and this is represented by most of the open space on this slide. That was the photo, the aerial image was taken in the early 1990s, and it's an interesting image because you can see the areas of kangaroo grass, which are the grey areas on the right-hand side of the image, and those areas are still mostly dominated by kangaroo grass. Of course, before all the suburbia existed out in the west of Melbourne, there was already a really long history for these areas. Iramoo sits on the newer volcanics, which were laid down around Iramoo about 3 million years ago. And many of the species that are there are vastly older than that. So I've done some work on striped legless lizards, and as a species, it's over 13 million years old. Amazing. It's the land of the Murrumbullock people for at least 30,000 years, and there's evidence of their presence across our 3 reserves. In 1803, so in timeline, you know, the time's contracting here, the explorers Grimes and Fleming passed through, and they described the area as an open grassy plain without timber as far as the eye could see. And we all know that things really started to rapidly change with the arrival of the squatters in the mid-1800s and their vast numbers of sheep. In the late 1800s, the land was further divided into smaller farmlets for the selectors. And we can still today at Iramoo see the impacts of the land management associated with each of those little small farmlets. And the red lines on this map are the boundaries of those farmlets, but they also unintentionally coincide with our land management units that we just imposed on the landscape a little bit later in relation to the vegetation, the characteristics of the vegetation. And so it's fascinating that there's that overlap. In 1939, the Albion Explosives Factory opened, producing TNT and propellants and munitions, and that was open for about 50 years. And during that period, in the Iramoo section of the explosives factory site, they had sheep grazing, and it's probably the sheep grazing was there to keep the biomass down for obvious reasons. But it's probably that sheep grazing that has contributed to the areas that we now recognise as grassland in that landscape, because a lot of the rest of it was really trashed. Somewhere between 1989 and 1995, the sheep grazing was removed from across the site and the Albion Explosives Factory closed. Biosis went out there in 1993 and did the first ever biological assessment, and they identified areas of conservation significance, and they found striped legless lizards in the area that's known as Iramoo. In 1995, I came out and commenced an honours project to investigate the distribution of the striped legless lizards across the Iramoo area. And I sunk a whole lot of pitfall traps, and on my very first day of surveying, I captured 10 striped legless lizards in my pitfall traps, so it was all pretty exciting. I've included the timeline partly because we're moving into we have moved into our restoration phase. But I think that, and Steve sort of touched on this a little bit as well, that we've got these vast periods of time of evolution, and then we've had sort of these impacts that have, been imposed for, not even 200 years out at Iramoo. And now we're into this restoration period where we're really trying to, get this restoration sorted, make it all happen really quickly. And it just sort of, for me, raises questions about ecological function in this new sort of landscape. Following the biosis assessments and all these striped legless lizards turning up, there was a parliamentary standing committee hearing, it was all very formal, to decide what would happen with the land of the Albion Explosives Factory site. And we were really lucky at that time to have two really great advocates, Dr. Colin Hocking from Victoria University, and also Alan Webster, who worked at what is now DECA back at the time. And they were tireless in pushing to have, this is all pre-EPBC, they were tireless in working to have as much of the really good quality vegetation protected and conserved for the species that were there as possible. And their efforts resulted in our large 32-hectare Iramoo grassland and two smaller grasslands. So Pimelia grassland, protected because it has a large population of Spiny rice flower, and the Featherheads grassland had really great floristic diversity. So thanks to Colin and Alan. Following on from all of that, there was a committee of management formed in the early 2000s. So that was the first committee of management. And this is what the area looked like in 2001. It didn't stay looking like that for very long after 2001. And this is more of what it looks like now. So there's been this really rapid and substantial change in the landscape with the construction of the roads and the housing. For Iramoo, that reserve in particular, there's been a big cyclone fence put up around it. People argue about the fence, but we sort of need it. You can see in the image there are huge stormwater ponds that have been installed to the north of the reserve, so that's another huge landscape change that has an impact. And we moved from, the sheep had been taken off and we started to reintroduce fire. So in a very short period of time, less than a decade, there was really a lot of massive change in this landscape. From the first committee of management, that sort of dissolved in somewhere around 2012, I think, and the the council was no longer, our local council wasn't able to take on the responsibility of it. But we'd sort of had that good decade of the reserve being set aside and people being really interested and the community getting involved. So we had this really great group of people who'd learned to love our grasslands. And that resulted in that group of people applying to form a committee of management. So the second committee of management was formed in 2013, and this talks about what's happened since then. So we formed the Cairnlea Conservation Reserves Committee of Management under the Crown Land Act, and it consists of volunteers, and we have a typical structure of a chair and a secretary and a treasurer, and some technical advisors. It's renewed every 3 years and it's currently up for renewal as well. All the work that the committee does is funded through grants, so they receive grants to pay for the land management and the materials and that sort of thing. The work's directed by the committee and the grants, but also there's a lot of volunteer hours, so that the volunteering is a really big part of what we do. So we've got the Friends of Iramoo, which is the local community group that helps out with our planting days and lots of advocacy and engagement and other activities. There's the GREEN Lab Iramoo, which I'm part of, which is a part of Victoria University, and our burns are fortunately done by Forest Fire Management Victoria. I've put Rick in the photo here because he's one of the strong driving forces here. He is our paid land manager, but the money only goes so far and Rick keeps going. So a lot of the work that he does is volunteer work. He lives locally, which is really valuable because that means that he can respond to conditions. So if it's been really dry, he's the person that, pops out on the Sunday with his water cart and waters all the plants that we just put in 2 weeks ago. Or if we've got an inch of rain forecast, he'll head out a couple of days beforehand and put a whole lot of seed down so that we get the benefit of the rain in terms of sowing seed. So we're really lucky to have Rick, and he's on a mission to get this grassland sorted. Go Rick. One of the things when we got going, we set up a 30-year management plan. So that was 2013, we're up to 2026, we're not quite halfway through. One of the very first things that we did was get our reserves back on the burn schedule, because with all the change in committees of management, it had dropped off. And we're really dependent and grateful to Forest Fire Management Victoria for doing our burns for us, because we don't have the skills, the resources, the insurance, the training, etc., to be able to do those burns. At the Iramoo Reserve, at least one section of the reserve is burnt almost every year, and in the other 2 reserves we're on a 3 or more yearly rotation cycle. We inherited a system of land management units with really exciting names based on sometimes tenuous characteristics of the vegetation. So we've got Themata 1 and Themata 2, and yep, they're covered in kangaroo grass, yay. We've got mixed 1, 2 and 3, and they do have kangaroo grass, but they've also got a reasonably high cover of phalaris and serrated tussock and Chilean needlegrass. The stony rise and the exotic are the really challenging parts of the reserve. They are basically just weeds. And then we've got Wildflower 1 and Wildflower 2, which sound like they should be really great. Wildflower 2 actually does have quite a bit of kangaroo grass. Wildflower 1 has a lot of weeds in it, but they're the wildflower name was given to them because they were areas of the reserve that still had some of that forb diversity, so lemon beauty heads and those sorts of things. In our management plan, we've got this stated objective, which is to have a healthy functioning ecosystem to provide secure habitat for the striped legless lizard and restore the full range of flora species that once occurred in the landscape. It's sort of a little bit ambitious, I think. But floristically, this is our Featherheads grassland, and it's covered in serrated tussock in this picture, and we wanted to get from something that looked like this to the photo on the right is taken out at Iramoo last year. So, we're really looking for that sort of change. Amanda put together a 30-year management plan with an objectives table, and doing that, each land management unit was given a vegetation quality ranking indicated in colours on the table, and then we tried to step those colours up over time. So as an example, for Themata 1, which started off with a beige, moderate vegetation quality, we were hoping to see a reduction of serrated tussock to less than 1% in year 1 to 3 and start regenerating herbs and wildflowers into the landscape, and then moving that up to a higher quality in years 4 and 7, and then achieving a very high quality in the time after year 7. So that's sort of what we've been working to. It was all a bit overwhelming, and our approach was to just get started and to accept that we were going to make mistakes and we were going to learn along the way, and I guess that's some of what's happened. We took the classic textbook approach of working from best to worst, and some of the other things that we sort of had to keep in mind was just keeping it achievable, start small and learn. And so we started with our small grasslands and cleaned those up and took our learnings out to our bigger Iramoo grassland. We knew sometimes we wouldn't have the resources to do everything we wanted, but we wanted to maintain at least the status quo. We didn't want things to get any worse. We also had some really challenging areas I alluded to earlier, and so our approach to them was to delay the very difficult. And so we've got a 30-year management plan, and we thought we'd be delaying these areas until sort of, the tail end of that management plan. Keep going, ride the bumps, learn and adapt, and importantly, celebrate the wins. In terms of working from our best to our worst, this has got a little video, and I don't know how to make the video go. At Iramoo, Themata 1 and 2 were clearly our most intact sections of the grassland, and we worked on getting them really clean so that we could use that area to harvest seed that would then be used for restoring the rest of the reserve. The Themata 1 and 2 still have Nacella and Phalaris in it. We have years where it looks like a great big expanse of Ostrostipa, other years where it looks like a great big stand of Themata. It goes up and down, and I think that's one of the benefits of having been out there so long, is you see how much things actually do go up and down. It's really dynamic, which is good because it means you don't have to worry so much sometimes. Awesome. And this is our kangaroo grass drying out in our seed store. So lots of kangaroo grass going out there. The Featherheads grassland, so one of those really small ones, was one of our biggest surprises. It was reserved because Biosis in 1993 went out there and found that there was this amazing floristic diversity. But by the time we came on board and all the houses had been built and the roads and everything, this is what we got, was a grassland that looked like it was just a field of serrated tussock. There was also Chilean needle grass out there. In consultation with various people, we were sort of told that we'd probably be wasting our time to even worry about it. It was probably irredeemable. But Rick's a pretty determined guy, and he got out there and got stuck in. He's got a bit of a magic touch as well. And so this year he went out there with 14 bales of hay, and this is him, kangaroo grass hay, and this is him raking that hay out after he'd already sprayed the serrated tussock. And this is what came up. The floristic diversity was still there underneath all that tussock, and I think that that's been one of the biggest learnings for me, is that that diversity can still be in those landscapes, even though you might not be able to easily see it. So we got this amazing return of our forbs, or they were still there, but we could see them again. What we didn't know, that there were sun orchids out there. So in the first year we found 19 individuals, and since then we've found over 200 individuals of sun orchids. They did not appear on any previous surveys. We didn't know they were out there. In 2023, after 10 years of roof tiles being out there, Rick happened to flip one, and hey, there's a striped legless lizard underneath. We didn't know striped legless lizards were out there. They never turned up in any of the surveys. It took that long to actually find our legless lizards. And then he found a few more. We added in some button wrinklewort, and the beetles found them, which is really cool. And we added in some podolepis as well. We've added in a few other things as well. For me, Featherhead's grassland is a testament to the durability and the recoverability of grasslands. It reminds us to never give up. I've included this slide. Mixed 1, 2 and 3 have their own sort of story, but that's maybe for another day. But the point of this slide was that I said we wanted to maintain the status quo. So when we don't have enough resources to do all the restoration work that we want to do, we need to still get out there and keep managing. So we did a little bit of spot spraying, and really it was just about freeing up a little bit of space for the native plants so that they weren't being outcompeted by the weeds. But then we had to deal with the very difficult. So we'd sort of got Iramoo into reasonable shape, and in 2020 we were looking at the exotic and stony rice that were just fields of serrated tussock and Chilean needlegrass. And we were really worried that when we got to spring, the seed from all those serrated tussock plants were just going to blow all over our, reasonably intact and clean reserve. And this is sort of what it looks like when this is our perimeter cyclone fence, where we've had a huge serrated tussock seed blow and the seed just builds up on the fence. And we've seen it in the media as well, people's houses getting covered in tussock and their pools having tussock blankets and that sort of thing. So we built a series of seed capture fences across the reserve that were sort of positioned to take into account wind directions and that sort of thing. And in November 2020, we did have a massive serrated tussock seed blow, and the seed capture fences did a pretty reasonable job. We went out there with a bunch of volunteers and we raked up 60 wool bales of serrated tussock seed. So then our next challenge was, well, what on earth do we do with all this bagged up serrated tussock seed, which is quite a nuisance. But fortunately, Exotic 2 and the Stony Rise got burnt a little bit after that. And so we dragged all those bales out into the middle of that already burnt area that had had no sort of control and didn't really have any significant vegetation values, and we set fire to them. And there's Wah, he was pretty pleased with that. And then what we were left with after that was the area in Wildflower 1 that still had about 3 hectares of serrated tussock covering it. And by this time we were really desperate that we weren't going to have serrated tussock blow anywhere across our reserve. And so we got stuck into the management of that really quickly. So in this picture you can see what Wildflower 1 looked like in March 2021. And then in October 2021, Rick and John went out there and did a top spray, and that was really to just try and stop the serrated tussock from actually forming seed, not so much to kill it. Following that, we had our first ever spring burn in November, and we just let it sit after that, and by autumn everything had come back green. The serrated tussock was growing beautifully, and Rick and John got out there and did a massive spray, spraying every single serrated tussock and Chilean needlegrass plant. And so this is what it looked like. The sort of browny colour in the foreground is our very thin, and I know it doesn't look thin in this picture, but it was a very thin strip of kangaroo grass, and the rest is this huge expanse of dying serrated tussock and Chilean needlegrass. So that had all happened in the May following the spring burn, and we were really fortunate to have Holmes Glen Institute catchment and land management students work with us over many years, and they came out and sowed a whole lot of grass seed over the areas that Rick and John were spraying, and we designated some areas for wildflowers. And so we got to a year later and things looked scrappy, and we did a whole lot of hand weeding and follow-up planting. And then we got to October of 2023 and we had our first ever spring fling, and Wildflower One put on this amazing wildflower display for us. By 2024, Rick had to tiptoe through the Pycnosaurus. I'll just whiz through, given the bells rang, a couple of slides in relation to the celebration and having fun and being engaging. So we've got our Marsupial Masterpieces project, and we also had a whole other range of fun and interesting things that we have done through the years. But most excitingly, out of all of this, we knew that we were on the right track when our grasslands were in good enough condition to receive plants for a reintroduction of small golden moth orchid, super exciting, and then we received plants to have a fragrant orchid reintroduction as well. So I guess we're feeling just a little bit fluorescent. So thank you for listening, and thank you to all the people who've helped along the way, because there are a lot of you out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. That was brilliant. Always very, very, very inspiring to hear that story. And, you know, community, perseverance and time and dedicated individuals and a whole group of individuals like what we have here today. And you can turn things around, you can make things good. And that's a fantastic story to hear. It's obviously like we've got some momentum here, and it's just great to see so much grassy action and grassy love in one place.